It's Tuesday, September 9th, and today's storms are going to be severe. And on our severe weather outlook today, we have a big marginal risk situated right here in the southern plains, stretching all the way down from the Kansas-Colorado border into parts of the Texas panhandle. Then, of course, there's also just going to be that widespread threat of some general thunderstorms out in the west and then also down here in Florida. But the severe risk is mostly going to be for that threat of some damaging winds, likely in that 60 to 65 mile an hour gusting range. And then for our hail threat, it's going to cover pretty much the same exact area, but it's going to be for some smaller hail. I wouldn't really expect to see anything over 1.5 inches in diameter with this, although it is important to note that it does cover a pretty wide area. So that's definitely something that you're going to want to look out for today. And there is no risk of tornadoes currently outlined by the SPC, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was a non-zero threat out here in parts of western Kansas. Then here's what the radar is going to look like in our big risk of severe weather today. We're going to see some storm initiation around the mid to late afternoon hours. They're just going to start off as a couple of blotches, and then they'll really start to mature into this big cluster of storms. We're really going to want to watch this sector down here in eastern Colorado, stretching down into western Kansas for a possible MCS that's expected to form along this high plains convergence zone. And then this is also going to be helped by some troughing, some flow, and then potentially a low pressure system as well. And then, of course, the geography and that convergence in that area. And it looks like these storms are going to start to bring those severe threats actually a bit later than normal. Really, they're going to be helped out by that low level jet. And that's when we'll start to see kind of everything start to unfold, potentially even a small risk of some spin up tornadoes along this line. We do see that our shear vectors are kind of more parallel than perpendicular to this line, which can have a knack for bringing some spin ups, but I definitely do think it's mostly going to be that threat for some 60 to 70 mile an hour damaging winds and potentially some small hail. And then I think that severe threat could also span all the way down the New Mexico Texas border, although this would be for some earlier hours in the day, likely being in the late afternoon and probably being done by around sunset in this region. And then there are a couple more areas seeing just some general thunderstorm activity that I do want to mention. One is going to be up here in the northern Midwest and Great Lakes region. Pretty much starting around the mid-afternoon hours, we're going to see some storm formation along a bit of a front up here as well as a low pressure system. And this is just going to be for some general thunderstorms, mostly centered over Wisconsin in the late afternoon. And then we're actually going to see a lot of thunderstorms out here out west, specifically in the Pacific Northwest. This little band associated with some troughing is something I want to focus on. This is going to be around the mid to late afternoon for our people out here. And this would just be for that general threat of seeing some strong thunderstorms. And this would also extend all the way up into parts of Idaho, Montana, and then kind of swoop down because a lot of these storms are going to be initiated by that trough. And the last place I'm going to mention is Florida. Florida is just going to see a lot of showery activity really lasting all day, brought by this little low pressure system and then frontal activity out here, kind of slicing through the center of the state. This kind of looks tropical in nature, but it's really not. It's just more of a embedded kind of spinach maximum or vort maximum that we'd call it along a trough pushing through. And two of those general thunderstorm activity areas that we just mentioned are also going to have a marginal risk of seeing some flash flooding. That would be for the threat of 1 to 2 inches rain out here in the Pacific Northwest and also Florida. Then there's also a little isolated blotch out here in eastern Kansas, which could see the same thing. And then this big trough bringing our severe weather is also going to be the culprit of some cooler than average temperatures, specifically out here in Florida. This is the coldest it has been in so long. You're going to be feeling some mid 70s temperatures out here in central to northern Florida. That's wonderful news for anybody in Florida. And also out here in the Pacific region or just western region, you're going to be seeing some really nice weather and a break from those really warm temperatures that you've been seeing on the coast because of that trough and cyclone kind of digging in. And then for the rest of the country, if you're out here in the plains and also river valleys, you're going to start to see a slight warm up from what you've been experiencing the past month, but still going to be pretty nice, not really eclipsing the 90s and still being in that mid 80s feels like region. Then for the rest of the east, it looks like it's going to be a lot of mid 70s. So overall across the country, it's going to be some very nice weather temperature wise. And then in the tropics, this is a really, really pleasant surprise. We almost never see no activity expected for the next week, especially this time of the year. It is September 9th, and tomorrow, September 10th, is technically the peak of hurricane season. So it's wonderful news that we don't see any development expected for the next week out here, and let's hope that trend stays. But moving back to severe weather and the things causing it, this is a better look at that big trough really kind of moving through the entire country. We see kind of this wave shape that you might see with like a graph or something. But this is definitely what's causing a lot of our weather. I'm going to start down here in Florida. We can see that low pressure system, and also this kind of bringing some just frontal activity to the state. That's the culprit of a lot of our weather down there. Then moving to our main region, we just see a lot of westerly flow across the upper plains. And whenever we see that, we definitely do have the chance of seeing some severe weather out here in that upper plains convergence zone. Then, of course, we also might have a bit of a short wave pushing through, although that looks pretty weak and negligible. And then also out here, we see this big cyclone or kind of trough pushing out into the Pacific region or just western area of the US. That's going to be the culprit for a lot of our weather out here as well. But for our main risk area down here in the upper plains, they do have definitely the access to a pretty favorable environment for some damaging winds, small hail, and even as we go further into the night hours and the evening hours, potentially a couple of spin up tornadoes. The main thing with this is going to be some very nice bulk or organizing shear coupled with some wind veering. That's definitely going to help to create some strong updrafts and some organized storms. Then also along with that, we do have enough moisture for these storms to develop, although it's definitely not a lot. We would like to see closer to the higher 50s. I think that is going to be one of the limiting factors with these storms today. And then also our Cape, definitely sufficient for storms around 1600, but also nothing super big. So I think those could be two hindering factors for our storms, and one of the reasons why they won't really peak at being super duper strong, severe, and likely mild severe storms at that. And also our downdraft Cape for our damaging wind threat is going to be 1500. That is pretty high. And we do have some dry air loft. And then also our relative humidity is going to be pretty low. So that's all things that are going to kind of make up for that lack of moisture in lower Cape and will be the reason why we could potentially see some 60 to 70 mile an hour damaging gusts. Then for that small hail threat, of course, we're going to have quite a lot of bulk shear whenever we see that. That normally means larger hail. We do have a decent mid-level lapse rate. So I definitely do think we could see some 1 to 1.5 inch in diameter hail. That's going to be hindered by that linear storm mode though. And then for our tornado threat, from this sounding, it doesn't look like we're going to have much of one at all because of this super high cloud base. But as we go later into the day and as these storms push eastward, they're going to go into an area which their cloud bases have already overspread, lowering that cloud base a lot. And also when the sun starts to set, that cloud base would be only lowered further. And then the low level jet would also kick in, increasing our shear a bit. So I do think in the early evening to early night hours, there could potentially be the threat of a couple of spin up tornadoes as well.